Hey guys, and welcome back to the newly named Blackstar City. Whilst we've been away, we've had some pretty major changes to the series. The first of those changes is the map, so let's have a talk about what I've done. Now I'll be the first to admit the original map was lacking some massive inspiration. I'd spent most of my time with the city and developing how I was going to make that work, and the map was pretty much slapped together, and things like the trees never really worked, and the rest of the map was just, I simply didn't spend the time with it that I should have. So our new map is basically going to show a planet with a climate in severe distress. Maybe we've got like runaway greenhouse gases here on Kepler as well, and this could be like 1,000 years in the future or something. But I also thought it would be pretty cool to have like an old or ancient city here showing that, you know, maybe there was signs of life here, maybe it was human life, I don't know, and they've succumbed to this like severe climate change. So remembering this may be 1,000 years in the future, what could be considered an ancient city, maybe a city or look like a city we would see today. So as crazy as this may seem with an old ruined city here and crazy climate and weather, I think this is going to be just a little bit more relatable for the average viewer as well. We can clearly see the signs here of the climate damage, and I think it also just sets a really cool tone for the series. One thing I really love about the new map in particular is this cool iceberg that I've made. It looks like this is floated really close to this coastline here, and this would be because of the warm seas, and straight away we can tell that this just doesn't look right. We know this isn't the way nature is supposed to be, and it's really going to help with that stressed out sort of dystopian vibe we're going for. So the second big change that I've made is I've introduced roads, and this is a massive flip-flop for me. I did not want to introduce roads into the city at all, and that's because I guess my version of a future city didn't really include roads. I figured it would probably transition more towards public transport, but the more I thought about it and experimented with roads, they just looked so good within the city, and they give me so many more options for the future as well. So with that, of course, comes the last major change in the series, and that was originally I was only going to build within this structure, keep the entire city within this structure, but now with the introduction of roads, I'm going to expand out from this main structure. So this will still be here and act as sort of a main downtown or CBD for Blackstar City. But yeah, with these road networks coming in, they just look really cool. And like I said, they're going to give us so many more options to build different things in the future. So in game, I'm using Cluse's 3-laned concrete highway initially here just to get the layout right, and eventually I find these really cool Chinese ones that have this like hexagon pattern skin on the top, and all of the line markings on the road glow at night, so it looks really futuristic. So at that point it's really easy, I just upgrade the ones I had made to the new Chinese ones. You'll also see that I've wound them up in these spirals to try and gain elevation to them in as least amount of space as possible, because we're going to have multiple levels vertically to the city. I want on-ramps, or the ability to have on-ramps and off-ramps at different heights. So I've used that same cool dome that we've used for the main structure of Blackstar City and wound a highway up and around that. And this is a perfect example of why I wanted to add highways and roads in general to the city, because look how cool that looks. I mean, it might look pretty pointless at the moment, but it definitely looks pretty futuristic, and I think it really adds something. There is one thing, however, that I am going to have trouble with, and that is because all the road markings and the lines on the highway glow when I use the intersection marking tool, they're not going to glow at night, so the intersections are going to sort of, you know, stay dark or whatever. But I still use the node controller to tidy up these interchanges a little bit, make them a little bit smoother. So now I'll use the procedural objects layers function to remove the buildings or the main structure from view, so that I can plumb in this highway to our existing sort of road structure within the city. And this is pretty easy really, even though it looks really messy here. My initial grid pattern is just two one-ways running each direction, so I'm just going to plumb in very simple one-ways, about 300 or 400 in-game meters apart. I've also got 3 different highway connections coming into the city here, so I don't get too carried away at this point. I only put one entrance and one exit down. And I must admit, I do cheat a bit here because I know that a lot of these roads are going to be hidden, and that's going to be a reoccurring theme within the city. I'm going to hide a lot of the roads that I obviously don't want to see, because we're going to build a lot of infrastructure, if not most of it now, around these road networks, and some of the more complex interchanges, or should I say ugly ones, are just going to be easier for me to hide behind procedural object buildings. It's actually quite difficult to explain, but you guys will get a much clearer picture as at least this episode goes, but definitely the entire series. This next part of the build here is pretty much massive and as unique as I could possibly make it in every single way. And I've mentioned a couple of times before in the series that I really want the city to work. I want the industry to work, I want people to have jobs. And a big part of making all of that sort of stuff work is making sure we have a good flow of industry goods coming into the city. Now with our new highways, of course we can have trucks bring it in, but I also want to include here like a rail yard or a rail cargo yard that can bring some goods in from out of town and disperse them efficiently around Blackstar City. So from a gaming point of view, this is the sort of stuff I really want to get in as early as I can, to make that city as efficient as I can, because I'm really going to detail very heavily around these things. They need to be right to begin with. So the idea with this area is I'm going to have that rail cargo yard right at the bottom, and we're going to have 3 or 4 different levels above that. We're also going to have a passenger train coming in here from out of town, so this area will become like a transportation hub of some sort, but there's going to be multiple of these in the city. I guess what's going to make this one unique is that cargo yard. This is the only one I'm going to have in the city. This should be only a need for this one. You can also see here I'm bringing in separate highway connections for this area, and these are very short and very to the point because, like I've mentioned a few times, I want these as efficient as possible, because we know industries areas spawn a lot of trucks, so let's make it easy for them. We're also going to be making a small amount of industries goods in our city as well, so if there's a surplus of goods being made, this will create the ability to export them really efficiently out of town. I also install a little wee road that runs back into Blackstar City if we're taking any goods directly back into the city, and then do sort of one final adjustment of the highways here and there, and then it's pretty much ready to carry on building this cargo hub. So one sneaky little trick that I'm going to use here is I'm actually going to zone out an industries area here right next to the cargo hub, and then use some procedural objects to cover it. And the reason I'm going to do this is because when we zone, if the buildings are no longer needed, or what they create is no longer needed, the building abandons and a new one builds back automatically. So if I can cover these zones, we're going to sort of guarantee that we're always going to have industries buildings that are in demand within the city. This should help us keep a healthy balance within the in-game economy. If it doesn't, well, oh well, we tried. But basically it just means that I don't have to worry about some of those pesky notifications I might otherwise get. So you can see here we've laid down our pedestrian paths where I want the movement between the 2 stations. And now I'm using the Dole nuclear power plant from Ronix 69 because this is a really like dystopian looking grey sci-fi building, and this is perfect for a basic shape to cover the areas that we sort of don't want to see. There's also a few retaining walls needed in this area, and rather than just having plain retaining walls, I'm going to make it look like these are sort of buildings. I'm also being very careful not to cover any of the pedestrian paths I put down. All of the buildings need to be placed around those, and eventually we're going to end up with all of the roads covered that I don't want to see. The train tracks coming into the cargo station are obviously going to stay exposed so that we can see the train coming in and out. But I'll pretty much keep putting these buildings down until I've got a basic shape and I've covered up all of the stuff I don't want to see. So with heaps to do from this point on, I need to start with the most important stuff. So the next thing is putting doors and trying to create realistic entrances for some of these roads through the buildings. So with deciding to cover these roads with buildings, I also have to take on the responsibility now of putting in doors and tunnels to make it look like they have appropriate access. So as non-fun as that may sound, it's actually pretty enjoyable, and it creates a pretty cool illusion. It's really cool watching the traffic move in and through some of these tunnels. So next I want to find a really square building and try and create flat roof areas where I can create like a second level around these pedestrian paths I've installed. And I'm using a building from City Wall here. This is a really dystopian looking building, which is perfect for what we're going for. And it's also very square, the sides of it and the roof. So this is perfect. I use this in multiple locations to add to the shape of what we're trying to achieve here. And it's good. We're slowly making progress towards, being able to detail this up, because this is really going to be heavily detailed here. So it's important to get all of this placement right. So I'd left the game for a little bit, come back, we've got trains coming in to both stations, we've got people using all the pedestrian paths. Admittedly, it's not many people at this point, but they're still using it, so now's a good time to start detailing. And one of the things that I do want to do within the city is make a point to use some of the same materials. So this skywalk here that I'm putting in, for instance, has a cool blue neon to it, looks really futuristic, and I've used it quite a bit in the series already. So using this again here sort of matches the two areas together. It looks like they've been designed and created by the same people. I'm also using a very similar design that we've seen on the side of the airport for one side of the cargo hub here. We're going to try and make it look like the pedestrian path that the people are using is sort of on a sub-level, and this path is winding from the cargo hub or the area around the cargo hub all the way up to the passenger train, so we should get a lot of people along here eventually. And the next major thing I'll do is pretty much just put the big buildings in, the big skyscrapers. I've got a whole lot of like neon sci-fi type buildings. Then I put some little wee shop fronts in on specific levels to make it look like they've got access from those levels that I've built. I'm using real shops here on these levels, so I've got to make sure we've got pedestrian paths that are accessing these shops, and I've also got to make sure I'm using the spawn points mod to change their service point back to a road. With these two things done, it guarantees that every service vehicle that needs to get to it can, and it also means that the citizens will use the pedestrian path to enter that shop. So eventually we're going to get lots of people come through this area and go shopping on their way to and from the train station. So with all of that done, we can really start knuckling down and detailing this now. So we've got advertising going in, we've got like bushes and planters going in. I also put some nicer flooring down in some areas, and then also really rudimentary things as well, like handrails where we need them. So what you're watching here is pretty much a very small example of what I need to do, and I do include more detailing in this episode. However, at a guess, I would say I've probably cut out more than 30 hours of detailing just in this area alone, and you'll see what I mean when we get to the end of the episode. I think I've definitely kept the most intriguing or interesting detailing in this episode, but there was also a lot of monotonous sort of samey stuff that I decided to cut out. But the basic idea with the detailing is we're going to have some areas that are very plain, very dystopian, very logical areas that sort of have a purpose. And I'm going to do my best to make it look like these are areas of the city you really don't want to go. They're dark, they're horrible, they're dirty, and then we're going to have these pockets of hyper commercial activity where it's really clean, much like the area we're doing at the moment. Very friendly, user friendly and inviting. They want you to come and spend money here. But maybe if you're not from the area, it's easy to get lost and wander off into one of those darker, more shady areas. I just want heaps going on. I just want movement and things everywhere. Pipes blowing steam, cables hanging down, people hanging around and trying to sell things, and cars whizzing by overhead, public transport whizzing past everywhere you look. I'm really trying to keep a clear picture in my head here of exactly what it is I want to achieve. And just quickly, I have to say, I'm really happy with my blend of series at the moment. I've got San Francisco, we're building in Europe, we're in Wales at the moment, and now I've got this, and they are all just completely different. So I've got to appreciate how awesome and just a breath of fresh air it is to come in here and build something completely and totally different. So here we're pretty much going to carry on putting down the buildings like we've just done before. And it was at this point here that it really started to get difficult building in here. You can see we've got multiple levels here and it's a little bit hard to sort of see where we're at. And I've built like this before on a couple of occasions, so I was expecting that, but it doesn't make it any easier when we get here. I've added the things I can to the procedural objects layers mod so I can hide them. But I've basically just got to do my best and push on getting these buildings in here. So you can see here I've got this cool mesh looking road with these cogs on it, and if anyone's wondering, this is called a steampunk road and it's by a chap named Indapney on the Steam Workshop. If you just type steampunk road, it's pretty easy to find. And as cool as this road is, I'm going to change it. I'm going to change it to an invisible road. This is a perfect road here to try this out. I'm still not sold on the idea of invisible roads, but I'm going to try it here and we'll see how we go. So eventually I upgrade this to those invisible roads. They're not perfectly or 100% invisible. They do have like lights down the outside of them, and I don't know whether this makes them better or worse, to be honest. But because they're one ways, I have to run two of them here, so I jiggle them into position as well as I can, and I don't fuss about where it sort of meets the roads on either end because I'm going to strategically hide them with our doors and tunnels like we did earlier. But this road is going to get a lot of traffic. That's why I've decided to do it, as well as its location sort of being about 100 feet above the rest of the city here. This is coming directly into our passenger train station from Blackstar City. Eventually I'm going to hook up the floating train from Nardo from here into the city, but for now this road gets heaps of traffic. Oh, so another thing I should mention while I remember is I've changed all of the vanilla vehicles out for floating or futuristic vehicles, if you guys haven't noticed already. So those cool highways we put down earlier have that sort of hexagon magnetic look to them. You know, maybe we could imagine that it's magnetically charged highways and there's no fuel here, there's no fuel being used. Maybe it's just that magnetic force that's propelling them along the highway. In any case, the hover cars look so much more appropriate. So the last thing you guys are going to see me do in this episode is some pretty hardcore detailing. I've saved the best for last. I'm going to detail one specific part of our build here very, very heavily on camera, and then I apply the rest of that detail off camera to the rest of the area. My main aim with this series is to try and provide some decent content for all those futuristic and sci-fi city lovers out there. As you guys can see from this, the amount of props on the workshop made by the likes of Nardo and Quad Riders is just insane. And like I mentioned earlier, I just have a blast coming in here and building. This is so much fun. But my number one goal remains the same. It's to provide the best content I can for the people that have subscribed to me. It's not to gain more subscribers. Please stay safe, guys. Look after yourselves, look after each other, and I will see you in the next episode. Peace.